Hi again then guys, and welcome to another speed build on Forza Horizon 3 in particular, and this time we're tuning up a car which sometimes kind of falls to the back of my mind within the muscle class, but whenever I think about the car and use it, it reminds me how much I actually really like this vehicle, the Chevy El Camino SS, based of course on the Chevelle, but obviously the pickup truck version. And this is a serious performance car. We reviewed it recently on the channel, of course, and one of the things that I mentioned about this car is how good the top-end performance is. Not just, of course, when it's running huge power, but even stock, it's very good. It's a lot quicker than cars like the Dodge Dart, for instance, if you compare them both without any upgrades. Now, as far as the engine, I would of course recommend that 1500 horsepower V12 to get your peak performance. For the drivetrain, again, I would recommend all-wheel drive. I would strongly recommend all-wheel drive on this car because you've got such a very front-biased weight balance and just in general not enough weight really grounding those rear tyres to get all of that 1500 horsepower down efficiently, especially not off the line. As far as aspiration, I would of course recommend the twin turbo. And for the rest, of course, stuff like the visuals are down to you. Increase the power as much as you can, lower the weight as much as you can, fit all of your racing parts, basically. And as you can see, I have opted to fit the roll cage, because as I've said before, it really does help certain muscle cars, especially classic ones, with their acceleration and their launch. Now, as you can see, it's fast. It's not necessarily Plymouth Cuda fast, but it's fast. 2 seconds to 60, 4.1 to 100, just over 267 flat out. Now this tune is on my storefront, but it's a slightly different version of this tune. It has the same essential performance, but it has a slightly more rear bias on the diff, so it's a little bit more tail happy. This one is more for if you're looking purely for the launch and for the straight line performance and don't really care as much about drifting and that kind of thing. So it depends what you want. If you like it to be tail happy, you could get the one from my storefront, or just follow this and make your own variation on the theme. Now for the gearbox, I would recommend a 3 on final drive, a ratio of 3. Then for the individual gears, 2.85, 1.99, 1.5, 1.17, 0.95 and 0.78. For the alignment, I've got neutral camber and toe on this one, as I usually would. I've got the caster, though, much higher. 7 degrees, and that's to stiffen up that steering. As I mentioned again in the review for this car, the handling isn't great. It's not bad, but it can definitely quite easily be outmaneuvered by a number of other cars, and that's just to aid with that. As far as the anti-roll, as you can see, we've got those on 36 and 20, springs on 257, 140, and I've opted for the highest possible ride height. You definitely don't have to do that. You can slam it if you want to. Technically speaking, slamming it does improve your handling because you're lowering the centre of gravity, but at the same time, you won't be quite as good off the line because having a high ride height allows for more suspension travel to take up the absorption, if you will, of the launch of a car, to put it simply. Now, you don't have to do that. Another thing, or another reason specifically why I do that is, as I've said before, I like my muscle cars to be jacked up. That's just the appearance that I like them to have. So of course, that won't be for everyone. As far as dampers, we've got those on 17, 12, 8 and 6. Aero, of course, doesn't apply. And for the diff, I've got 100% on acceleration, as I usually would, 0 on decel, and as you can see, and as I mentioned, a 70% split, whereas on my storefront, it has an 80% split. The performance is fairly similar, but it's more tail happy. So, that's it for the tune. So now let's take it out on the street to see what this monster can do. Now, as I mentioned, the handling on this car isn't exactly conducive to strong cornering potential. However, when you tune the car heavily, such as with this tune, you will be surprised by how cooperative it is and how good around corners it can be. It's nowhere near as good as some other muscle cars can be, but it's still not bad at all. In a straight line, it's a monster though. The acceleration is very strong. It takes a little while to get all the way up to 267, but it can get there, definitely. It can comfortably get up around 260 on most straights, but to get to 267 just takes that little bit longer. So overall, if you haven't tried out the El Camino, I would definitely recommend giving it a try because it's really a novelty car that has genuine usability. So I hope you enjoy using this tune, of course, and there are hundreds more just like this on the channel. But for now, as always, thanks for watching.